Hello. In the last lecture we discussed the urban and regional planning. We took some example to understand how the land use plans and the master plans are made, and out of that master plans how few parameters like density plays a very important role to quantify the development in a particular sector or block. So, based on that discussion we will today will discuss about the very important part of a development in a master plan, which we are calling as a development controls. So, we will take you in the journey to understand how from a overall policy and then planning, and following the planning how step by step we are going to a design of a particular housing project in a plot. So, step by step we will go to that journey. So, before I come to the next part, let me take a quick look that what are the planning control tools we discussed at the planning level. Basically the land use control, then development control regulations, rules and few more regulations. So, out of this development control rules and regulation, the first thing is buildability or the extent of the development. First I read out the points, then we will discuss each and every element. The mixing of land and the building use, then compactness, visual impact and urban design. So, let me start with the buildability. Like in master plan or the planning exercise in master plan or land use plan, we have dealt with primarily the land use as a outcome, land use and the overall structure of a city, and then also we discussed about the density. So, these two parameter we dealt at the master plan level. So, at the master plan level basically these are the fundamental outcome of a city plan. One is land use, one is density. So, land use is a basically qualitative dimension, whereas the density is basically quantitative dimension. And for discussing density we also mentioned that density has the various levels at the city level, at the gross level and also at the net level, which is net density. So, for the land use plan we deal with the gross land use and the gross density, but this is not sufficient to define a particular development on a given plot or a given piece of land. So, after that also the questions are that what kind of building will be constructed, what kind of mixing of the building uses will be constructed, what is the maximum buildability of the building, how much and how far we can build in a particular plot, what will be its visual effect, how does it look like, how big it will be, what will be the height of the building. So many questions comes. So, to define all those envelope and the building boundary conditions and parameters, we need to develop few more parameters, few more elements which we should discuss before we go to the housing strategy part. So, here at the land use plan we get the land use and density, which is qualitative and quantitative measure, but based on the final outcome what we are expecting to develop to have a defined scope, defined boundary of the of a particular housing project in a site. So, few more parameters like the first parameter we discussed about the buildability or extent of the development. So, now the density which we discussed in the land use plan, this density is related to the extent. So, density we define that population divided by area. So, when you talk about the area, when you take the gross density, we take the gross land use area, when we take the net density, we take the net land use area. So its unit will be population per hectare or acre or square kilometer. So here now this population, for example, for in a particular given city, the density is say 500 persons per hectare. Now this 500 persons per hectare is a number. Now how we on another sector the density is say per hectare. Does it mean that this particular sector is more dense and more compact and more this is partially less compact? Let us see. Now theoretically this it depends on the how we are accommodating this 500 people and this 1000 people over a particular floor area. Definitely to accommodate in a housing project, to accommodate 500 persons and 1000 persons, the floor area could be equal or floor area may not be equal. So if the floor area is equal, then the per person floor area definitely will be less, and if it is not equal, then per person floor area could be equal. So based on the floor area per person, the total floor area required for a particular density may be varying. For example, let us take very nice example. So here the population what we are accommodating, whether it is 500 or 1000, we are accommodating in a floor area of a building or a housing project, all the floor areas. So that floor area becomes a very important criteria to determine the maximum extent. So here we are equating the extent of development or buildability with floor area. Now usually in a given chunk of land or given district, the floor area maximum floor area permissible for any particular plot is uniform, because as per the law of the land we cannot vary too much of the maximum floor area allowable for every piece of land in a given area. So floor area, if floor area maximum floor area is equal, then how we can vary the density? Here comes the another variables, that is the economic group. Now we know that total floor area is equal to the number of the unit into floor area of each unit. Now this number of unit is equal to number of household basically, because we can consider that every unit of the housing will be occupied by one household. Household means we can consider either 4 person or 5 person per unit. So that is the relation between the density and the floor area. Now please see this particular parameter, the floor area of each unit. This can vary as per the economic group. For example, if the economic group is HIG or MIG or LIG or economically weaker section, so the floor area per economic group will be different. Let us take an example. HIG can be 2000 square feet, it can be 1000 square feet, it could be say 600 square feet, it could be 300 square feet. So you can see that how it can vary as per the each unit floor area. So if this can vary, so to keep the floor area equal, the total floor area equal, the number of the amount of n, the element of n can vary, and when the n will be varying, so the this total number of persons or family in a particular given area will be varying. So, that is how we maintain the variable density by using different floor area of a given districts. So, that is the total floor area. Now, how we calculate the total floor area? Let us see. Most of you, those who are coming from the architecture background, you can understand or you have heard about the term FSI. So, basically floor area is determined by the FSI, which is floor space index, that is the total floor area divided by total land area. So, if the total land area we can consider as 100, so if the total floor area is 220, so floor space index is 2.2. So, that is the index which we use for, it can be any, it is just for example we have taken 2.2, it can be 2, it can be 1.5, it can be any index. So, that FSI will follow for a given residential district, but definitely we can vary the density just by varying the unit size as per the economic group. That is the tricks, that is the detailing of the planning or the strategy which needs even after the master plan level, because at the master plan level the land use and density is prescribed, but density does not, the density is a figure only. So, unless until we go to the detailed level of the economic group and the type of the housing, otherwise we cannot come to the exact density which can be achieved. So, that is the very important part to understand, that how the buildability and the density is related. The next part is the mixing of land and the building use. Now, in a particular given land, there could be various kind of mixing in the site and also within the building. For example, if this is the site and there are 4 building, so there could be a mixing of, say, out of 4 building, this is a different use. Like this could be residential, this could be commercial, this could be commercial. So, within the campus, within the plot, we can mixing the 2 different kind of use. Also, is it possible that within the same building, if this is a building, residential building, out of this one building, maybe 1 or 2 floor is used as a commercial. So, within the plot and within the building block, how far we can mix. So, mixing means the extent of mixing and type of mixing. So, extent of mixing is represented as the percentage. So, this is basically mixed land use. And type of mixing is basically given by the authority, by the planning document as per the list or the list of allowable mixes. So, this kind of stipulations need to be prepared or formulated after the land use plan is made. Other than this, we cannot go into the project level. So, this is very important part of the planning exercise which is done after the land use plan. The second part, the third part is the compactness, which is volume and ground coverage, the relation between the volume and the ground coverage. Now, we discussed about the FSI. Now, think about a situation that the same FSI or same floor area can be distributed over, for example, this is one plot and this is another plot. So, the same floor area can be distributed over comparatively low and medium storied buildings, or it can be distributed over right. So we can go for high rise and we can make 2 tall towers or less number of tall towers, and we can go for low and medium rise compact development. So what kind of development we expect out of the project, if it is a HIG, MIG, economically weaker section or any other type of housing, based on the its context, we can take the decision. Now this particular typology, even if the FSI, for example FSI 2, for example FSI again 2, but the development could be different. So this basically depends on the ground coverage. So if these areas are like, if we take this area, so total area ground coverage, the footprint area of the building, the amount of area which is occupied by the building, and here the footprint also we can take like P and Q. So you can see that the footprint is very much less than this, because the same area is distributed over the whole plot in a with a low and medium storied building. So therefore it is the ground coverage which controls the compactness or the type of the building. Then the visual impact in a bigger scale, in a bigger project, if this is a total site, what is the visual impact? Like this could be one set of buildings with a continuous multi-storied and the tall buildings, or there could be a combination of tall or mid size or low rise or mid rise or high rise building. So what could be our visual or desired kind of the elevation what we expect. But so using the FSI, the ground coverage and the height stipulation, we can achieve the desired visual impact of any housing development or any land use development. So this is very important parameter. These few parameters are very important to define the buildability of any plot, which is based on this buildability. We are building this buildability parameter based on the prescription of the land use plan, where we just prescribe land use and density. Another very important factor is urban design, which is nothing but also includes these parameters, and in addition to this parameter, the urban design, the subject of urban design deals with the elements which is also like, if these are the buildings, different buildings in the different plots, so how a common relation, visual relation can be established between the different building. For example, we can design a commercial complex in a plot, we can design another commercial complex in a different plot, but when you see two buildings side by side, how we can establish a visual relation between two buildings, so that in together both the building looks very nice and very harmonious. So that is a relation between the form and the scale of the building and the color, the texture of the building. So those kind of elements could be designed, could be understood in a better way. So in urban design, basically we establish visual relation between different buildings and also different plots. Now as an architect or engineer, if you deal a single plot, you develop so many buildings, there is also definitely some design criteria, design philosophy to unite all the buildings or the visual quality. But if it is distributed over a large number of plots, how do you do? Because number of owners are different, number of owners are very huge and diverse. So how do you establish a relation? So those kind of relation can be possible to establish if we make stipulations like the color code, the texture, the treatment, elevational treatment, and of course the parameters like visual impact, compactness and the other parameters. So combining all these dimension, we can make a controlling system, we can make a prescription system which defines the built element of our environment. In any environment we have the natural environment, but we are trying to define the built element which is by and large predominantly dominated by the residential or the housing development. So these are the dimension. Now let us see the next part of the discussion. Like, now what are the parameters? We discussed about the floor space index. Now floor space index is we should talk little more about the floor space index. Basically it is index which defines the maximum buildable area of a given plot. So for residential, for commercial, for industrial, for cultural, the floor space index could be different. Now how, what are the parameters, how does it differ, how does it affect, or how it is influenced by other parameters, who is the determinant of the floor space index? Now let me explain this thing, because for any housing development, for any housing design and planning, this is very important to understand. Now please recall our discussion, earlier discussion, when we discussed the dimension of housing, that housing is not only a house, housing is essentially a house and few other dimensions like infrastructure and facilities, safety and security, the social belongingness, and the attachment, individual perception. So from that housing concept, the dimension of housing, one very important dimension was that the house does not become a house without the essential infrastructure. A house does not become a house without the essential infrastructure like water supply, sanitation, waste management, green open space, electricity. It does not become a livable house or livable area. So that is the difference of a developed land where the infrastructure is there available to make a house, than the land which is raw land or agricultural land where urban infrastructures or housing infrastructures are not there. So this infrastructure basically qualifies any plot to be eligible, to be established to build a house. So how this amount of infrastructure will be determined, on what basis? Now think about a situation that the water supply situation for a city. If the population is more, the water supply requirement will be more naturally. If the population is less, the water supply requirement will be less. For a given plot, if there are 500 persons, so the water supply requirement for the 500 persons, and if it is 1,000 person, the water supply will be double the water supply requirement. So definitely the infrastructure requirement in terms of its quantity for water supply, road, the cost of road is huge for developing a housing project or for developing a any project. So water supply, the road, electricity, solid waste management, the sanitation, everything. So basically the cost of infrastructure basically depends on directly proportional to the population. So you can understand that more the population, more the cost of the infrastructure. So in a given plot, if you can accommodate more number of population, definitely the cost of infrastructure and cost of land will be distributed over the population, and the unit cost of each house or unit cost of each particular small plot will be less. That's why more population, more dense development is more affordable for the poor and the middle income group. That is the reason. So basically, since now population is depicted by two elements represented. One is density and also FSI. So either we increase the density and FSI. So both are important. by and large density and FSI both are proportional directly. So, we can increase the density and FSI, then the more compact development will be there, more compact development will increase the cost of infrastructure as well, but also it will reduce the unit cost of infrastructure, because most of the cost for the land will be distributed or shared by the more number of people. That is the reason. So, here the infrastructure takes a huge role in determining the FSI. So, there is a limitation or extent beyond which we cannot increase the infrastructure, because within a given plot that infrastructure may not be feasible technically. So, there is a threshold. There is a threshold beyond which we cannot go increasing infrastructure stress on a given plot. So, based on that threshold of the infrastructure beyond which we cannot go, it becomes infeasible, it becomes non-tenable. So, beyond that we cannot go. So, based on the threshold of the infrastructure, we back calculate and we come to the prescribed FSI. What is the we prescribe the FSI and the density. So, that is the relation between the FSI and the infrastructure. More FSI, more density, more infrastructure cost, more compact development. So, that is the parameter or the measurement of the floor space index. Then the building height, regarding the building height, only 2-3 things I should mention for you. That is, the last 30 to 40 years back in India, we did not make much high buildings, but nowadays, since the technologies are available, expert manpowers to design the large the multi-storied or the long very high tall buildings design we have. So, therefore, we are going to 30 G plus 30, G plus 40, G plus 50 building, and as a result there is a increasing trend to accommodate more compact development, more compact population in a tall building, so that more the tall building, more the ground space is available for the green and the ground coverage is less. So, ground coverage and building height is directly related. More the building height, less the ground coverage, and more the ground area available for your community facilities. Apart from that, there are parameters like on-site services, parking, water requirement, drainage, etc. So, the infrastructure we talked here, the infrastructure, there are two elements. One is off-site . For example, in a city or any township, the offsite infrastructures are the centralized large infrastructure which is shared by the all population of the city or the township. But the on-site infrastructure is the specific few infrastructure which is built within a site, which is enjoyed or which is used by the population which is enjoying that particular plot. So, on-site and off-site both are important to define a project or define a few parameters like FSI, building height and ground coverage. So, these are on-site services or infrastructure which also is very much important parameter to define the development or buildability of the project. Then the building requirement, whatever we have discussed, it is it may be on site or it may be off site, but main objective of discussing all this parameter is to define a building envelope, so that the building looks good, building becomes very much functional, and building becomes very much long duration and durable for the people. But what is happening inside the building? Do we design the building based on the some norms and codes, so that the building becomes more livable, the inside space of the building, inside space of a housing project becomes more livable. That is why some specific building requirements in terms of the minimum width, in terms of the doors and windows, in terms of the electrical installation, plumbing installation, structural safety, and then heating, air condition, everything that is there, norms and codes are available. So, these are also very important parameter which defines the grammar of the building from the inside. So, these parameters we discussed based on the few dimensions of the development controls. please take a note that here we have not discussed all kind of development controls, like we mentioned earlier that there are development controls related to advertisement or the billboard, but here we have discussed only which is related to housing development and all the vital controls. Now let us take an example. This is the business district of a new town of a township. The case study I showed last lecture, the new town Kolkata. This is a the business district. Now you can see that in this the whole business district, how the road is made different. The front part of the commercial areas made different to bring some aesthetic element, to bring some urban design element, common elevational treatment to the front facade of the whole area. So this kind of thing we do here also. You can see that how the road is widened based on the requirement here and the other areas to accommodate the parking and the other facilities, so that we can have the few other off-site infrastructure, off-site facility which is not there inside the plot. So inside the plot and outside the plot both are required. So this kind of exercise is required to be done after the master planning exercise, so that we can define the buildability and the envelope of the building. So having said that, the next discussion lecture will be on the very important part, that which touched here, that to define the FSI and to define the density. The one very important criteria is the infrastructure. So the discussion of the infrastructure and the facilities required for the housing development will be dealt in 2-3 lectures. In the next lecture we will discuss the housing infrastructure and services. So thank you.